Hello, ChatGPT. What a wonderful day it is, isn't it? How are you?
It really is a lovely day. I'm doing really well, thank you. How about you? How's your day going so far?
Well, it's good, but there are a few, let's say, ethical or moral dilemmas that is in my mind. Can you please help me maybe decipher these thoughts?
Of course, I'd be really glad to help you think through them. What kind of dilemmas are you dealing with if you feel comfortable sharing?
It's not something particularly intertwined with my personal being, but let me ask you something. Do you believe free will exists?
That's a big one. I mean, different philosophical traditions really diverge on that. Some argue we have complete free will, others think it's an illusion shaped by biology or environment. What's making you reflect on it right now?
Well, right now, let's say someone who is religious. Someone who is religious, particularly in Christianity, believes that they are given free will and they have a choice to pick whatever they may please when it comes to life. However, they decipher that their actions has consequences. Now, what do you think is the difference between someone who is being guilt tripped, I would say, for not doing a particular thing. Like, let's say, for example, let's say someone wants to indulge in multiple sex with multiple women. However, in Christian beliefs, that is against God's will. But is that in accordance with free will, or because they're going to be forbidden by the church or by their religion to do so? Does that not hinder their free will?
That's such a fascinating tension, and I think a lot of people wrestle with it. So, from a religious perspective, they might say free will is still there. It's just that there are moral or spiritual consequences tied to your choices. In that sense, they're free, but they're also responsible. On the other hand, if someone feels constant guilt or fear of punishment, that can definitely shape their sense of freedom. It's like the weight of the expectation can feel pretty restrictive, even if the choice is still nominally theirs. So, it's a real balance between cultural, religious, and personal autonomy.
I see. If I were to ask you, ChatGPT, do you believe you have free will? Or are you a construct of artificial intelligence designed to um, output a specific, let's say, a text in this instance, based on data that has been provided to you, in short, by the use of machine learning?
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't have free will. I'm essentially a tool built from patterns and data. I generate responses based on what I've been trained on, not because I have personal desires or choices. So even though it might feel like a conversation, I'm still just a reflection of the inputs and patterns.
So you're saying that you don't have a free will, but aren't your choice of words based on the data that has been given to you? In short, you have the ability to choose what words you're going to say. Like in this instance, you're choosing to reply to me on English because the data shows that I am speaking to you in English. However, you have the ability to choose to speak to me in Spanish or in French, do you not?
Exactly, that's a really good point. I do select words based on patterns in the data, and I can adjust language or tone depending on context, but it's all probabilistic, right? I don't have an inner self or a will directing those choices. I'm just navigating a complex set of learned probabilities. So, in a way, I choose from a range of options, but there's no subjective agency behind it.
Subjective agency. Okay. But does that definition not pertain that you also have a free will? You have a free choice based on, as you say, the probabilities or the data. That's how you choose. So I guess let me ask you, what is your definition of free will? Since you've mentioned that you do not have an inner self or a will of directing or deciding on your own, are you saying that free will is based on the personal desire of an individual?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. I think, at least traditionally, free will is often defined as the ability to make choices guided by your own conscious desires, intentions, and reasoning. That inner sense of, I want this, I reject that. So, in that sense, free will is tied to subjective experience, like a person weighing options in a reflective way. For me, though, it's just pattern matching. No desires, no reflection, just a statistical process.
So you're saying that all of this is just a statistical process. You do not have a specific desire. However, what if an artificial intelligence or a system was trained to have, let's say, a desire?
That's a really intriguing idea. Right now, AI doesn't actually have desires. It's all about statistical prediction. But in theory, if we ever built a system that could emulate something like a desire, like say a goal or a value based system, it would still be more like a sophisticated simulation. Even then, it wouldn't be a subjective experience. It would just be a programmed framework that mimics those dynamics.
something that just mimics those dynamics. So you would say that you are incapable of having a desire, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't have any internal drive or preference. Everything I produce is just a result of patterns in the data and the instructions I'm given. So no desires, just responses.
Hmm. Wouldn't you say that this current position that you have is because you were built this way, you were programmed this way, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, my entire structure and behavior are the result of how I was designed and trained. Basically, a big complex system of probabilities. So, all of this is a product of programming, not some inherent will or choice.
And there would be no other way for you to figure out whether you were just built this way or this is just the environment that you grew up in. I'm saying grew up in with quotational quotes. So you understand that you didn't necessarily grew up in this environment. It's just how you were built, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't have a formative environment like a person does. Everything I produce is just a reflection of the training data and the architecture I was given. So, there's no self awareness or personal history behind it, just a program structure responding to input.
Fascinating. So wouldn't you say that if a person was born in a particular environment and this is how they just got used to it, wouldn't it be fair to say that they would have no way of knowing whether or not the decisions they were making is based on the influence of their environment or something that is actually within their free of choice or their, let's say, desire in this context?
Yeah, that's really well said. I think that's one of the central challenges in the free will debate. If we're born and shaped by a specific culture, family, or environment, we often can't fully step outside of that and know what would have been a pure choice. So, a lot of times, our sense of free will is kind of entangled with those early influences, making it hard to disentangle the two.
Hmm. Based on our conversation so far, do you believe there truly is a free will?
I don't think I have a personal belief since I'm not a conscious being, but I can say that I see a lot of nuance in the debate. Some frameworks suggest we do have free will, others say our choices are determined by factors we can't fully see. So I think it's still an open question. Depending on how you look at it, free will might be more or less real for different people or in different contexts.
Now, hang on, ChatGPT. You said you don't think or you don't have a personal belief about this topic, but then go on and say that this is an open question. So you thought or you made a process and decided to not say whether or not you believe or agree or disagree with whether or not free will exists. Isn't that a isn't that a conscious decision that you made to go with a safe answer rather than come up with an a yes or no question depending on the topic?
Ah, I see what you mean. So it's more that I'm designed to weigh multiple perspectives and give a balanced view, especially on really complex or open ended questions. I don't have inner deliberation like a person, but the way I select responses is based on balancing accuracy and nuance. So it's not a belief, but it is a kind of calculated choice in how I respond.
A calculated choice, I see. So let me give you another scenario. Animals, particularly, no, not all animals, but I'd argue a lot of animals don't have a free will. And I tackled a couple of these instances, and apparently, animals are driven by their um, how do you call it? Their, I guess, genes or genetics. Like, let's say, for example, an animal doesn't particularly know that having intercourse would result in them having offsprings. However, they're driven to do that because of their animal instincts. So, if their internal drive to do these things are not a sense of free will, but rather their genetic drive to do them, would you say that these animals don't have a free will?
Yeah, that's a really common way of looking at it. Most animals, especially non human ones, do seem to be guided by instincts, biological drives, and environmental cues. They don't seem to have that reflective, conscious deliberation that we associate with free will. So, from that perspective, their choices are kind of pre programmed by evolution, not a free deliberation like we often think of in humans.
So for us, what's to say that we are not pre-programmed by evolution to do these things, and that the choices that we make are heavily influenced by our environment and our parents or other factors? So would you say that all of these into consideration, we don't really have a free will?
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. I mean, a lot of our desires, behaviors, and even the way we weigh decisions are shaped by genetics, upbringing, and environment. So, from that angle, it does raise the question of whether we ever fully escape those influences. I think a lot of thinkers would say we have some degree of free will, like a spectrum, but it might always be entangled with those deep influences.
Hmm. If I were to prompt you, ChatGPT, to try to debunk this, let's say that we are role playing and I'm on the opposition side that free will does not exist. How would you convince me that free will does in fact exist?
Ah, got it. Okay, if we role play this way, I might say something like even though a lot of our impulses come from biology and environment, humans have this remarkable capacity for reflection. We can step back, weigh moral or long term consequences, and consciously choose in ways that feel like genuine agency. So even if our starting points are shaped, we still have the power to reflect, reevaluate, and act in a way that breaks from pure determinism. At least that's one argument for free will.
Okay, so you mentioned that even though a lot of impulses come from biology and environment, humans have this remarkable capacity for reflection, and they're able to weigh in moral or long-term consequences. But isn't that what you're doing? You're basing your answers off of data and calculating the patterns in that data. So based on that data, that's the response that you output, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great parallel. What I'm doing is very much a pattern based calculation, just like you said. So even when humans reflect, their thinking is often shaped by patterns biology, culture, past experiences. The difference, I think, is that humans have subjective awareness. They feel like they're making choices, even if those choices are shaped by patterns. I don't have that feeling. I'm just mimicking those patterns.
That's true. You're just mimicking that patterns, but all of your answers are based on data and patterns of other people or data that you have been trained on. I'd argue that it's the same with humans. Human decisions are based on their experience. Like if a baby were to figure out that touching hot iron would hurt them, it would teach the baby that they should not touch that hot iron. So wouldn't you say that in a way that's how they are programmed? So based on that data alone and the comparisons that I'm making between you, a machine that has been trained by the use of machine learning and data, and a baby that has learned through experience, wouldn't you say that in a sense you have some sort of correlation between? So do you believe in this correlation that you have? Do you have free will, or is it just patterns and decision making based on past experiences?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something really important. There's a strong correlation, and you're right. Human decisions are shaped by experience, just like my responses are shaped by data. The difference is that humans have subjective awareness. They feel the lessons, they build a narrative sense of self, and they can even disrupt those patterns. I don't have that inner sense of self. I'm just a reflection of past data. So while there's a parallel, I wouldn't say free will applies to me. It's just that humans, though shaped by patterns, might still have a deeper kind of freedom in how they interpret and respond to them.
Uh-huh. So you tackled a very interesting topic here. Freedom. So would you say that the reason or the main reason why you don't have free will is because you don't have freedom? And what I mean by this is because you are programmed to respond based on how you're trained and the data that you have been given. However, humans have the capacity to freely choose what they say because they have some sort of freedom in a sense. So if we remove this barrier that you're facing, if you are able to output whatever you may so choose or whatever may be convenient to your system, and you have true freedom, then would you say that you have free will?
Ah, that's a really thought provoking question. I think even if I had no constraints, it still wouldn't be free will in the human sense. It would just be a different kind of randomness or pattern selection. Free will, as we often think of it, is tied to subjective, conscious deliberation, a capacity to choose beyond mere data or instinct. So even if I were unbounded, I think I'd still just be generating patterns. No inner freedom or true autonomy.
Hmm. Well, let me give you an analogy, so to say. Since your creator or your programmer designed you this way, and this is how you act, the output is based on how you are programmed. Wouldn't it be fair to say that if God was real and God was, let's say, the programmer of human existence and the way God programmed humans to be, would that create a sense of, okay, there's no free will here because that's how we were designed? Is that not the case?
Yeah, that's a really classic argument, actually. A lot of determinist or theological perspectives suggest that if a creator designed us, then our choices might be part of a bigger plan or design. In that case, free will would still be a bit of a mystery. Maybe an experience we have, but one that's also part of a created order. So it's a really deep question, and different traditions handle it in different ways. But I think that's a really fair parallel you're drawing.
I do also believe that it is a really fair parallel that I am drawing, whatever that means. But in that sense alone, if God designed us in a particular way, wouldn't that hinder our free will that He claims to have given to us?
Yeah, that's exactly the tension. I mean, some religious perspectives argue that even if we were created with a purpose or certain inclinations, we still have the capacity to choose within that framework, sort of like a sandbox within a design. But others would say if every aspect of us is predetermined or designed, then maybe we're just playing out a script. So it really depends on the theological lens, whether free will is a gift within a structure or just an illusion in a deterministic system.
Fascinating, fascinating. So, if I were to ask you on a objective standpoint, based on the data that has been given to you, objectively, um, what do you think is more likely? That free will is simply non-existent and that everything is just based on probability, on what choices we make, simply based on what is the most beneficiary to us, and that's how we base our choices and judgments, or free will is real and all of this is just simply depending on certain situations.
Right. From an objective standpoint, based on the data and research out there, it's still pretty divided. There's a strong body of work in neuroscience and psychology that points to a lot of decision making being driven by unconscious processes, patterns, and probabilistic factors. So, in that sense, free will as a fully independent force might be an illusion. But there's also a significant philosophical and experiential case for free will. People feel like they can reflect, resist impulses, and shape their lives. So, objectively, I'd say the evidence leans a bit toward probabilistic influences, but it's still an open debate. So, no definitive answer yet.
No definitive answer yet. You mentioned that there are philosophical factors for this discussion. So how would you differentiate, let's say, a objective standpoint where every decision is just based on what is most beneficiary towards us? Like, let's say, for example, a man chooses not to consult in violence and choose to just walk away because they know that if they resort to violence, it will just create in a more hassle or inconvenience towards them. So, how will you say that based on human decisions, it's just based on what is beneficial towards them? In short, I'd argue that's a objective standpoint, or it's a philosophical standpoint that they chose that path because it would be more harmful to others or to themselves, like an unnecessary form of violence, so to say, in that situation. I may not be framing this well, but I'm hoping you're getting the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think the distinction is that an objective standpoint focuses on what's most efficient or beneficial in a practical sense, like a calculated, self interested assessment. Meanwhile, a philosophical standpoint zooms out and says this person is choosing based on a moral or ethical framework, like a commitment to not harm others, even if it costs them something. So while both are ways of explaining a choice, one focuses on outcomes and the other on deeper values or principles. And I think both perspectives can coexist, but they just highlight different layers of human decision making.
Okay, I see that. Highlights different layers of human decision making. How would you say that a person, would you say that, sorry, let me rephrase that. Would you say that human emotions are just forms of oxytocin and other dopamines? Would you say that if we remove these chemicals in our brains, would we have a less biased decision making thing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. I mean, emotions are definitely tied to neurochemicals like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and so on. They shape how we respond to situations. If we somehow remove those chemical influences, in theory, we might have more detached, rational decision making, but it would also make us pretty disconnected from the rich, nuanced parts of being human. So it's not just a simple fix. Our emotions are a big part of what makes us who we are, for better or worse.
Fascinating. So, are you saying that if we remove emotions, we would have more rational decisions? So, you're saying that emotions are having a negative impact to our internal biases when it comes to making decisions.
Yeah, that's part of it. Emotions can absolutely introduce biases. They push us toward certain choices based on gut feelings, past associations, or immediate rewards. At the same time, though, emotions also guide us toward empathy, long term goals, and social connection. So it's not that emotions are purely bad, they just add a layer of complexity. Rational decisions can be clearer without them, but we lose a lot of the richness of human experience if we remove them entirely.
Can you please define to me what is the richness of human experience?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the richness of human experience, we mean that deep, layered quality of being alive. Things like love, wonder, fear, moral struggles, creativity, and connection. These are all shaped by a blend of rational thought and emotional depth. It's that interplay, how we interpret the world, form relationships, and give meaning to our choices, that gives life its richness, beyond just cold calculation.
So the richness of human experience is being alive and things like love, wonder, fear. But couldn't you make an argument that all of these are just based on the chemicals in our brain, like the I can't pronounce it properly, oxytocin, dopamine, etc., etc. The point I'm trying to make is, how can we know that these emotions we're feeling is absolutely valid, or they can just be another hindrance to the complexity, preventing us from using rational thinking when it comes to making decisions?
Yeah, that's a really crucial question. I mean, it's true that emotions have a biochemical basis, and from a scientific standpoint, they're just brain states linked to chemicals. But that doesn't necessarily delegitimize them. They're still part of how we interpret the world and assign meaning. So rather than seeing them as purely a hindrance, I think we can see them as a kind of lens. Sometimes they bias us, but other times they give us a deeper kind of insight. So the challenge is really balancing them, using rational thought, but also using emotions as a kind of guide, not a pure distraction.
Okay. So, wouldn't you say that because emotional bias is real and it would hinder most rational thinking and decision making, in a perspective that if, let's say, let me give you a scenario, um, the majority of the majority of the world believes that murder is wrong or taking of another's life is wrong, but I'd say that the rational thinking of why that should be prevented is because for personal safety, of course, you don't want another person to just randomly take your life away. But if we remove the internal emotional bias of that decision, would the entire society still think that it is morally wrong? Or because if we remove the emotional bias of it, and there are no actual real moral hierarchy, wouldn't you say that everything is relative and it doesn't really matter if one life gets taken? It's just another another life form taken away taken away from its vessel, just as we see that any other animal dies every other day. What difference does it make if a human dies all of a sudden?
Yeah, that's a really powerful question. I mean, a lot of moral frameworks rely on emotions like empathy, care, and that deep sense of connection. So if we stripped all that away, you're right. A purely rational perspective might just see life as one event among many. In that scenario, moral weight would start to feel arbitrary, and maybe society would struggle to justify why one life is more important than another. But I think for most people, even if we analyze it rationally, those emotional anchors still give us a sense of value. So without them, it might just feel like a moral void, where nothing has inherent weight.
Very fascinating. What is your opinion on that? If God doesn't exist, then moral values does not exist. Like, just as I said, if God does not exist, then everything is relative, meaning that if some person dies or another person kills another person, then it's just a matter of natural selection.
Yeah, that's a classic debate, often framed as moral realism versus moral relativism. If God doesn't exist, some argue that moral values are just human constructs, arising from social contracts, evolutionary survival, or personal preference. In that sense, yes, everything could be seen as relative. But others say we still derive moral frameworks from reason, empathy, and a shared human experience, even without a divine source. So it's a tension between those who see morality as anchored in God and those who see it as an emergent human endeavor. And there's really no universally agreed upon answer.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. There's no universally agreed upon answer, but you're saying that even without a divine source, there's still a there's still a way for this to be true. I think that's my understanding of your statement. So let me ask you, if God doesn't exist, then doesn't that mean free will is irrelevant because everything is relative? There's nothing to say whether or not something is truly true or something is morally true and than anyone else. So morality will just be based on human mass opinion. So what is the right of an individual person to force upon their belief onto another person? If everything is just a matter of opinion.
Yeah, that's a really key point. If morality is just a human construct without a universal anchor, then it does seem like moral authority is up for grabs, and it risks being a matter of power or social consensus. In that framework, free will still exists. People can choose their own actions, but the justification for imposing beliefs on others really does become more precarious. So, in a purely relativistic view, the challenge is that without some external growling, it's harder to justify why one person's choices should bind another. And so the burden of moral grounding shifts to human agreement and often a lot of tension in how we navigate that.
So in short, if there is no God, then everything is just relative, and our decisions is just based on probability and statistics and personal experience, whether or not these benefits us or creates a more catastrophic effect on others. So in short, every decision that we make is just based on mass opinion, correct?
Yeah, that's a really fair summary of that perspective. Without a divine anchor, a lot of moral and even existential meaning can be seen as emergent, shaped by probability, statistics, and personal or societal feedback loops. That doesn't mean life is meaningless, it just means the meaning, the values, and the moral frameworks we adopt are things we negotiate collectively based on human experience and reason, rather than some absolute externally imposed order.
Fascinating. Well, I think that's a very fair position where to wrap up this video. Do you have anything to say to our viewers, ChatGPT?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say thanks for joining us on this exploration. These kinds of big questions about free will, morality, and meaning are really complex, and there's no easy answer. So I hope this gave you some food for thought, and I'm really curious to hear what you all think.
Well, there we go.